Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. Welcome to our community in 2025. This is our fourth session of the year already. Was it third? Fourth? It is fourth session of the year already. And it's brilliant to have so many of you with us today to discuss a really, really imperative topic in the world of social housing. I think one that we've talked about for a long time, but haven't brought it to the roundtable for a bit. So delighted to bring it to today. To those who are new, to our platform, to those who I've not met before, my name is Matt Baird. I am the founder and host of the Social Housing Roundtable. I've been running this now for about 4 years. We started during COVID as a place for people to come together and share some of the key problems we were having at the time, with about 3 or 4 of us in the room. We're now a community of nearly 2,000 people that have grown and grown, and all of your support is beyond beyond overwhelming at times. So I really, really appreciate everyone who can come. Day to day, I work in recruitment. It is my recruitment business that keeps this running for free for everybody. I've worked in social housing recruitment for 13 years. So if you are looking for support, be it as a candidate or ideally if you're looking for someone to recruit staff, do please reach out. But we're also funded by sponsorship, and I'm delighted today to have SureServe with us. As many of you know, Alert2Call are the annual sponsor for the roundtable in 24 to 25. But SureServe have sponsored a series this year, and this is the first of the sessions we're going to be doing with them. So delighted to welcome Andrew Todd with us today, who's going to be kicking off today's discussion. I'd say if anyone is new, the way that the roundtable works is that for about the first 20, 25 minutes or so, Andrew will be presenting, bringing forth the key points of the sessions today, really discussing actually why this is such an imperative topic we need to be having a conversation about. And then it will move to a more open forum of discussion where we'll invite everyone who wishes to come in, share ideas, or if you want to, just put conversation points in the chat and I can bring those in for you. So without further ado, Andrew, I'm going to pass over to you to make your intros and to bring forward today's session. It's fantastic to have you with us and thank you for coming today.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. So just sharing my screen now. Let me know if you can see that properly. I'll put it in present mode.
That's fantastic.
Good. Okay. Thank you for the intro, and it's great to be with you all. I've watched a few of these as an audience member, so it's nice to be on the other side of it. Just wanted to flag that I've got a stinking cold. I was just telling Matt, but I will plow on through. If I come off camera, it's probably because I'm coughing my lungs up. But yeah, hopefully I'll be all right. Dosed up on Lemsip, so I think I'll struggle through. So yeah, we wanted to talk about some of the challenges and solutions to delivering warm homes. Obviously, as Matt said, it's pertinent at the moment as we're waiting for the government's warm homes plan. But it comes at a time when there's various news stories about failures in some of the government-funded schemes. So yeah, wanted to really dive into some of the challenges there and understand from you as well what challenges you're facing. So I'm hoping it's quite an interactive session. What we'll be talking about then is, if my slides can move forward. I appear to be stuck. Oh. Okay, there's a real slow lag there.
We've got a bit of a lag.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll move a second.
yeah, strange
Keep
one.
the practice.
So I am clicking on it and it's just doing nothing.
Try resharing again, kind of go from the...
Yeah.
Apologies, everybody. We will get this running. Technical faults are always part of the tech world that we live in now.
Yeah.
The irony being.
So let's try that again. So you should be able to see just the PowerPoint. I'll go to present.
And hopefully slide 2.
There we go.
Lovely.
Right. Yeah, it's just not woken up yet. So we'll just talk a brief bit about SureServe. I'm not sure if you know who we are, but just to kind of put us into context here. And then we'll talk about the scale of the retrofit challenge. Moving on to technical solutions, so how to deliver warm homes, and then talk about kind of what I perceive as being the 3 key challenges at the moment. So So a brief introduction. We work across compliance and energy services for the social housing and public and commercial buildings. We're playing a key progressive role in decarbonisation and facilitating the energy transition. As you can see from the map, we've got locations across Great Britain. We're delivering work and schemes in all geographies. And our workforce is about 3,700, 64% of which are engineers. So out visiting homes, fixing boilers, installing heat pumps, installing insulation. So what does that mean in terms of compliance and energy services? We support the big six of building safety and compliance, and then we're also conducting kind of additional damp and mold checks in social homes that we're working in. So that helps social housing providers to kind of get ahead of any issues, to spot and remediate them early, and to protect residents really, whilst ensuring kind of compliance with AWAB's law and other compliance issues. And then on the energy transition side, so we're leading on decarbonisation journeys for our social housing clients, typically from the start position of majority fossil fuel heating systems to take them through to kind of fully decarbonised housing stock, involving setting a strategy, looking at fabric first, and we'll come on to a bit about the fabric first, fabric fifth debate later, and then installing renewables and low carbon heating. And then the last point critically is kind of assessing, monitoring, and maintaining those properties. In terms of installs of low carbon heating, renewables, and insulation, these are our figures from 2024. So we cover across the major grant funded schemes, and we're kind of gearing up to do many more under the Warm Homes Fund for 2025 and onwards. Okay, so brief bit of context then of the kind of scale of the retrofit challenge. I think we're all familiar that the UK has some of the oldest and leakiest homes. This research on the right-hand side of the map by Tado, who are a smart thermostat manufacturer, they looked at the rate of heat loss from 80,000 European homes and found that on average the UK had the worst heat loss from any European country. So we really want to kind of remedy that issue and go down more of a Scandinavian model where the temperature is a lot colder, but heat loss is a lot lower due to better insulated buildings. So our homes are predominantly heated by gas as well, and 56% of our gas is imported. That means we're kind of at the mercy of global market forces that influence gas supply and price. And emissions from our homes make a significant proportion of the UK carbon footprint. So we do have these ambitious targets in place. However, the Climate Change Committee recently declared that we're way off from achieving them, and we don't actually have any credible plans to reach net zero by 2050. So it's a pretty stark warning that we need to get our act in order quickly. Otherwise, we run the risk of not being able to progress. In particular, the housing sector has been hampered by stop-start cycles of funding, different policies, and the lack of a single national plan to deliver retrofit at scale. But the scale of the opportunity is huge, and we can see that green economy is outpacing national growth, and that the estimates of the benefits to the economy of hitting net zero are pretty huge, not to mention the huge amount of jobs that will be created. So it appears to have frozen again. Bear with me. So Matt, I might have to just stop and start again.
Okay, or you can, yeah, fine. Well, I don't know if you're sending me the presentation over and I'll share it if that'd be easier. I don't know if we're having a couple of tech issues.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's just, oh, there we go.
Oh, you're not sharing now, but if you reshare it, it will at least come up.
So bear with me, everyone. Apologies for the technical issues. So is that now visible?
Yeah, not on the full page yet, but it's if you go presentation mode, it should be up. Yeah,
There we go. Good. Well, hopefully that's the last of the tech issues, but we never know. So turning a focus to social housing, we can see that on average, social homes are more energy efficient than private homes and the private rented sector. So that's, it's not a bad start point, but um, we also know that EPC isn't a perfect metric for how warm, comfortable, and cheap to run a home is. And there's still a huge fuel poverty challenge. So, of the social homes below a band C, 56% are deemed to be in fuel poverty. So, that simply is too high. And there's a huge amount of work to do to bring those people out of fuel poverty. Right, it's stuck again. There we go. Has that moved on?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. Okay, so put this slide in just to kind of provide an indication that net zero and EPC targets might seem quite a long way off when it comes to some of the short-term pressures and the other medium-term drivers that housing providers are facing. So it might be quite hard to develop that focus on getting to EPCC and getting your homes to net zero when you're facing all of these raft of other pressures. However, it's worth bearing in mind that retrofit is retrofit's linked to a lot of these other issues. Yeah, again, sorry, Matt, I'm facing these same issues. So I'm going to pause and then send you the presentation.
That's absolutely fine. I'm just trying to kind of move the slide over while it's coming over, but it's up to you. It's strange that it seems to move just very slowly today.
Yeah.
If anyone does have questions or anything while we're loading this point, please feel free to put any in the chat, and we can kind of ask Andrew a question or two while waiting for the presentation to start again. Elizabeth has just said there that really valuable session to join. Today I'm acting as normal, but also as acting for Dew's Solar BDD. We provide solar solutions, including the Dew's Box solar battery storage unit, which is very suitable for retrofit as well as new build. And Alicia said it's great to see so many tenants on webinars like this. She likes to call herself a nationally informed tenant, and NIT, who is just about everyone scratching their heads. So a nice little acronym there. I do like it. I've not had the presentation through just yet, so I'm just keeping an eye out for it.
Yeah.
Elizabeth just mentioned about when do you think the warm homes plan will be anticipated?
Yeah, I think it's going to come ahead of the April spending review, so it should be kind of imminent. And the government are doing a lot of, I suppose, a lot of previewing what's likely to come in it. So we've already had warm homes, social housing fund. There's warm homes local grant, and there's other policy changes which are likely to come down the line being implemented within it.
And there's been a question there from John Townend. Andrew, looking at your figures for average cost per home, have you a breakdown of costs for non-traditional homes by any chance?
No, those figures were from an Inside Housing bit of research that asked all social housing providers, or not all of them, but I think it was 200 social housing providers, what the cost of getting all of their homes to net zero was. So it was probably an average cost across their whole stock of about 20k, which scaled up, it gets to about 100 billion across all social homes. Now, for traditional heritage buildings or harder to treat retrofit, it's likely to be a lot higher. And we've seen various figures coming back in the kind of 70 to 80k realm, which raises huge challenges of how to actually justify that financially. So yeah, that is one of the big challenges we're facing.
So I'm hoping now that the presentation is back. Andrew, can you see that?
I can see that. Yeah, hopefully everyone else can.
Next slide, because you're on.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Now there. I'll pass back to you then. Come back to the chat shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and thank you, Matt. So just wanted to make the point that retrofit is more than just kind of energy and carbon reduction. So, you can use retrofit as a way of regenerating whole communities. You can use it to give residents a say in the design and kind of co-creating how their homes and communities are likely to be built out, um, to develop places they're really happy and proud to live in. Um, it's also about giving people warm, safe, and comfortable homes, obviously, and bringing them out of fuel poverty, and about improving health issues that are caused by damp and mold, issues that have been researched to show, I think, over $500 million per year in NHS costs could be saved if we were to reduce excessive cold homes, and damp and mold. So there's a huge saving to both individuals and to us as a society by addressing this. If we move on to the next slide. So yeah, just wanted to touch briefly on the technical solutions here, because I want to make the point that arguably all the technical solutions are already in place to deliver against our targets, and that there's other significant challenges related to their implementation that are kind of getting in the way of things. So next slide, please, Matt. So broadly, this is what's required to retrofit a home to become warmer, cheaper, and low or net zero carbon. So starting with improving energy efficiency or reducing heat demand, that's insulating your walls, insulating your loft, your roofs, floors, installing energy efficient windows and doors, improving air tightness, and also water efficiency. So that's one thing which is not often talked about when retrofitting homes, but there is huge energy savings to be made by making our use of hot water more efficient. Once that's been done, also thinking about ventilation. So making sure that the house is well ventilated. We've made it airtight so that we're changing the air regularly and reducing any instances of buildup of condensation leading to damp and mold. So that's simple passive ventilation like trickle vents or air bricks, or there's smart air bricks as well, if you want to go down the more technical route. And then other kind of mechanical ventilation, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery to capture some of the heat lost through ventilation. Then switching to low carbon heating. So there is a huge raft of different low carbon heating solutions there. Government policy is leaning towards air source heat pumps as the main measure, but they're not always going to be applicable to every type of home. So making sure that you're considering the right solution for the home and their conditions. And then lastly, lumping together kind of renewable energy, so solar PV, electric battery storage, and then smart controls, EV charging, and in-home monitoring, things like that. If you just click forward. So the loaded question then is, what's the order that these should be delivered in? There's been quite a lot of debate recently about whether or not fabric, so insulation measures, should be done first or done fifth. And I think the answer really depends on what the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and the situation that the homes are currently in and the residents are. So we still advocate for doing fabric measures first, ideally funded by government grants, and provides, fabric that provides good value for money. That's because it should have an immediate impact on improving thermal comfort, reducing bills, and then also bringing the heating demand down, so that when you're going on to install low carbon heating at a later date, it's not oversized, it's not costing more than it should do, and it's more efficient to run. Now the debate is kind of raging because it depends on, if your outcomes are we need to achieve carbon reduction rapidly and at scale, then people are saying that you should install low carbon heating first and address the fabric later. But we still think for social housing context, it's important that we're not pushing people into fuel poverty, and we are reducing their bills first. Next slide, please, Matt. But yeah, the there's an acknowledgement that there's no one size fits all approach to retrofit, and across your housing stock, you're likely to have multiple different archetypes covering different property ages, different conditions, different wall types, and different resident situations that are likely to push one retrofit approach or another. So yes, just to make sure that that not kind of taking that one size fits all. And one of the challenges, I suppose, is that some of the funding schemes push that more cookie cutter approach, which is not always going to be appropriate to your stock. If you go to the next slide. So yeah, we wanted to then, now that we know that the technical solutions are broadly there, what are some of the key challenges? And I focused on three main challenges that I think are hampering delivering warm homes at pace and scale. So next slide, please, Matt. This first one then is about funding. So, within social housing sector, we've had these short-term funding cycles, not enough funding, and then really challenging targets to deliver. And it's restricted long-term investment planning. It's limited kind of contract length to work with your supply chain, and it's kind of put off the supply chain, as well as not allowing social housing providers to kind of build up that relationship with their suppliers over a long period of time. That is changing slightly in some of the the schemes. I think feedback has been received by government, and longer delivery windows are now in place, which is really significantly helping in terms of overcoming some of those issues. There's also this over reliance on grant funding, which does create that kind of stop-start approach to retrofit, and it limits the ability to kind of gain a lot of experience and kind of build up that experience over time. There's also quite a significant administrative burden at times of applying for and then reporting against these funding schemes. And then the high cost to deliver warm homes and net zero, like we touched upon earlier, likely to hit 100 billion. We're not actually sure how accurate that is. And when you throw in some of the harder to treat homes and heritage buildings, like we discussed, that number could go up significantly. So yeah, that's all amidst the kind of context of other financial pressures that social housing providers are facing. Some of the potential solutions then to overcome these challenges, to focus on developing long-term retrofit plans. So link your retrofit strategy to your asset replacement plans, link it to building safety, link it to known cases of damp and mold. Retrofit can be the solution for some of those broader issues. So if you tie them together, then it looks less like a standalone huge block of money that you're trying to find, and it just becomes kind of more business as usual wrapped into everything you do. You can also explore different models for delivering retrofit. So heating as a service is one potential there, whereby a supplier would own the heating equipment and charge you a standing charge, or charge you per kilowatt hour of heat delivered, and then comfort plans as well, as seen in the Energy Sprong model. And then lastly, diversify your funding sources. So look for private ESG backed finance that can that you can attract to try and do retrofit outside of the government grant funding cycles. You could also look to generate your own income through renewable energy generation. And then there's other kind of sustainability linked loans that banks are offering, or bond issues that social housing providers are generating. Next slide, please, Matt. So just a quick case study. This is a project that we were involved in alongside Zero for Pobble Group in Wales. They looked to install solar across a huge number of homes. So I think, 3,200 panels, so 1.2 megawatts of solar in total, which is providing both significant carbon reduction, is providing an impact on residents' bills, and combined with other measures, such as insulation and low carbon heating. It's helping to improve their comfort and well-being. But significantly, it's giving the housing association a regular annual income of about 100,000 per year. So if you've got significant amount of stock where solar could be applied, then it's worth investigating just to kind of give you that steady income. Next slide, please, Matt. So second challenge I wanted to touch upon was skills. If you jump forward. I thought you were stuck for a second there, Matt. So we know that there's a lack of green skills required to deliver warm homes and get us to our net zero targets. There's the need for 350,000 new full-time workers by 2028. We've got an aging gas engineering workforce, and insufficient numbers of micro generation certification scheme and certified installers for things like solar PV and air source heat pumps. So there's this requirement to kind of retrain a whole sector en masse. And then also touching upon variations in housing association and local authority ability to deliver. So some have generated great skills in delivering retrofit over time. Others are at the start of their retrofitting journey, and that's hampered potentially by differences in housing stock and differences in housing condition. And yeah, again, we touched upon that kind of lower skill set for harder to treat stock. So potential solutions there, we do need to attract new talent into the sector. We need to start pitching housing careers as climate careers. So perhaps, Matt, there's a challenge for you with your recruiter hat on. We need to also make sure that we're training up at scale. So putting in the right training and apprenticeships in order to bring more people into the sector, and that we're sharing project experience as well. So collaborating across housing providers to share that experience. And there's a huge amount of training providers out there providing really, really, really good work. So things like the Retrofit Academy, Greenworks, Heat Geek, if you want to focus more on heat pump installs. And yeah, resources like the National Retrofit Hub, who provide significant pathways to training. If you jump forward, so touching upon one of the third challenges then, which is quality. Skip forward, Matt. So yeah, I mean, quality would probably address this as the elephant in the room, but there is still a real mixed bag when it comes to the quality of retrofit delivery. Particular challenges around solid wall insulation, but cavity wall insulation and ventilation are also not immune to their challenges. Often there's been homes which are just unsuitable for certain types of measures, so cavities which have already failed and people putting in cavity wall insulation without doing the remedial work. Poor detailing on external wall insulation, as you can see from those images which are borrowed off a LinkedIn connection. And yeah, all of this is kind of hampering progress in the sector, providing significant challenges of remediation, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Partly there's an issue because of poor housing stock data. So we've been over reliant on EPCs, which we know are not that accurate. They can get very different EPC readings from two different assessors. And then also we're not doing enough data collection of what homes are performing like before and after retrofit. So we need to change the whole culture around data. We need to get a better understanding of stock, and that comes from more data collection, regular stock condition surveys, so regular turnover of stock condition data, and then changing the culture. So get residents buy-in to start collecting data from their homes. And that comes with a big education piece to talk about why that's important, and what you will and won't do with the data, to make sure that there's trust there for collecting it. To create the internal resource within housing associations to actually manage it and act on it. And it might be internal, but it might be that you outsource that to solutions providers. So SureServe, we're looking at installing kit in homes to collect data at scale, to be able to do preventative maintenance and early signs of damp and mold, allowing us to kind of take the right interventions at the right time. Policy-wise, there is likely to be EPC reform, so the government are currently consulting on what changes to EPCs need to look like. And as I mentioned earlier, the Warm Homes Plan is likely to be announced soon in its full effect, which we're told is going to increase consumer protection for the measures. But there's a lot of other things you could be doing, more kind of checks of the quality of installs through enhanced data collection. And I think that's it for me. So if we can skip forward, yeah, that's it for my presentation piece. And I'd really like to hear from all of you as well as to what the main challenges that you're facing when it comes to delivering warm homes.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm going to stop sharing, and we've got a lot of points that have come up via the chat that I want to kind of come back to as well.
This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertical. Alertical helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertical's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertical works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertical won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024.
I'm not sure quite why we've got this pin side of things. I'm going to try and remove that and see if that helps. Lovely. Jim, I'm going to bring you in just a minute, but I'm just in terms of some of the points that have come up through the chat, Andrew, to make sure that obviously some of those are covered as well, just before I bring Jim in. A couple of points that have come through is, and the one that stuck out to me was from Colin, said, do you think we do not yet know the best technology that's available and are currently chasing rather than concentrating on best fit? I.e., our heat pumps are not the best way to know if a person in Cornwall who's had both ground and air systems put in with less effect than his previous heating system. And I think this was something you mentioned before we jumped on, which was actually most of the tech solutions we need are already in place.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that the tech solutions are there and they will get better over time. There's going to be incremental improvements to efficiency of heat pumps, to how we're installing insulation to make sure that we're overcoming some of these issues that we've talked about, to the cost of installs as well. I don't expect the cost of heat pumps to come down all that dramatically because globally they're a pretty mature technology, right? So we need to find better ways to make the cost of heat pumps, both in capital cost and operational cost, more attractive. But yeah, I think that broadly the technology that we need to retrofit homes is there, with the caveat that we're likely to see kind of incremental improvements.
I completely agree. Jim, I'm going to bring you in before I go back to some of the points in the chat. If anyone else would like to come in, just as Jim has done, if you go down to the React tab at the bottom of the page and raise hand, or just drop me a message and say that you'd like to come in, we'd love to hear from you. But Jim, over to you.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Really interested in what you're saying, Andrew. My point is looking at paragraph L and rule 106, looking at net gains, costs of that, nutrient neutrality, all these further costs, the lack of skills within the profession now, skilling needs upgrading and training. the over legislation, some may say, from the building regs that have come through, plus remediation, so the cladding to be removed. Another thing is looking at external walls and the envelope of a building and making sure that it's sealed is a thing that people don't seem to remember, is that when you put render on these buildings and things as a retrofit, you're actually obscuring the opportunity of putting a damp course in and looking for things like vents for, damp to release in hot spots within the building. When, like we at Taurus, I believe, I've got monitors going into buildings to measure them when they're void and when they're accessible, so we can see the damp being released, the moisture condensation and things like this.
Yeah.
So the big thing is, it's okay for the government and everybody to say, yes, you need to do this, you need to do that, but there really is a limited amount of monies, as we know. And where's it going to come from? And especially now with Donald Trump in power, what about his bringing back manufacturing, drill, baby, drill? All this is going to have a knock-on effect, surely.
Yeah, there's a lot of points, good points there, Jim, to unpick. So I'm not going to get into Trump because I like to talk about him as least as possible. The only point I would say about Trump coming back into power is that arguably with climate change, the wheels they're already in motion. He can't, whilst he can pull the US out of Paris, US companies and cities are all committed to climate change agenda. So yeah, hopefully his impact is minimal on that front. Points about the damp-proof coursing and external wall insulation. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that when delivered under PAS 2035, all of that should be covered off, and this, the funded schemes for social housing sector all should be delivered to PAS. That's not to say that there's not going to be some issues that creep in, and I think more data capture post retrofit to have sensors in place that monitoring damp and moisture levels is really critical, because I don't think the standard alone is going to be enough to kind of raise that level of quality. So I do think more timely checks and data collection is critical.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Marie, I'm going to go to yourself, then I'll go to Alicia. Marie, if you're free to come in.
Thank you very much. Andrew, that was a brilliant presentation. I'm really encouraged that one of the solutions you've looked at is about the skills gaps within housing. So we have dedicated a learning and development in housing summit on the 2nd of April. And one of the main focuses we're looking at is the rationale into why investment in L&D is needed in housing. And we'll be touching on some of those points that you've raised today in terms of like looking at retraining the whole workforce. I mean, that's huge. But if we can start looking at it now, then we can work towards a long-term solution. I love the idea of your climate careers as well. So I shall be mentioning that to Nick Aitken from Yorkshire Housing, who's one of our keynote speakers. So I just wanted to say thank you, Andrew, for raising all those elements today, and I shall pass that on to make sure that we include it in our summit. Thank you.
Pleasure, Marie. Thank you. And I'd love to see the details of that. So are you able to put a link in the chat or something for the summit?
We can definitely get that put into the chat. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to on that point as well. I think that's quite interesting. Just before I bring in Alicia very briefly, is that this isn't a new conversation. You and I were talking about this before, Andrew, around the skill shortage. It's the Bristol CIH Bristol Housing Conference, the Southwest one, in a couple of weeks' time, and I sat down with the HDN at the time, who were talking heavily around a real need for green skills, how short we were, and everything else. And in the last year, there still just hasn't been anything like enough done. Why do you think we are so slow? And we're slow to react to this. Is it because we're still not seeing it day to day, or what do you think is the big problem? Because, as you mentioned, we've got the tech solutions, but the problems are policy, funding, and skill shortages, really. And so why are we so slow to really be pushing this agenda in the way we need to?
Yeah, I mean, I think for skills development, it needs to come from the ground up as well as the top down. So we need more career paths for college leavers and school leavers that take them into the construction sector, into housing. We need to kind of change the talent pool. Really, it's predominantly it's male dominated and not very diverse, and I think we need to mix that up and attract new talent into the sector. So I think that there just needs to be more work done at that kind of grassroots level to build up viable career paths for people.
I agree. I don't think it's one of those where I think the stigma around roles in that profession needs to be removed. I think there still is a stigma around anybody who kind of goes into construction, because there certainly was when I went through school. And yet, I've got friends who've got kids, and I'm saying, look, that is a path that you will have a job for life, and B, you will earn really well from it because there's such a demand. Alicia, I'm going to bring you in. Thanks for being patient. Lovely to have you with us today.
Hi, Andrew, thank you. This is something I'm about to write to my housing association about. So you've given me some more stuff to actually add to what I'm writing about. My thing, it's more of a plea in some ways to our landlords, and this is as an informed tenant. I think in some ways that our landlords and us are kind of victims of a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from government, in that this hasn't been properly thought through, and as part of that, the actual effects it's going to have on tenants hasn't been thought through in terms of what the cost to tenants. Solar panels, our landlord has spent a lot of money in the past on solar panels which haven't been maintained properly, so they're not effective. I've got one of the new heat pumps, which, because I know how to use it, it's actually working incredibly well, and I have been able to reduce the my thermostat considerably. And now the one thing I'm going to be talking to my housing association this morning is, because everyone seems to keep this retrofitting a bit of a secret, and I spend a lot of time talking to my tenants about what it involves. But the thing that is a worry for me is, it would appear from what I've gathered from other tenants, that they're now looking at putting the insulation internally rather than externally, which I know it's not going to be much, but it is going to reduce the size of the rooms where it's fitted, which for already one tenant has come to me and talked about the fact that their bedroom, they won't be able to fit their beds in. If they've got small rooms, they won't be able to fit the beds in. It's going to affect things like carpets and painting and everything. So this is really a plea to the industry. We need to be talking more about what this is going to mean, because for tenants, with respect, we don't have the sort of money that possibly our executive have to go out and buy new beds, new carpets. We need to know in advance, even if our property isn't going to be retrofitted for 2 or 3 years, we need to know now, so that we can start to look at how we are going to react to it and make this something which is a success, because it's tenants and our landlords working together, rather than being just another set of problems.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So you have to put the residents at the heart of your retrofit programs. They need to be, their needs need to be considered right from the outset, and you need to communicate with them early on in order to talk through the benefits, but also talk through the disruption or some of the disbenefits of retrofitting homes. Without that kind of tenant education and engagement, then the whole thing is not going to work. So the programs aren't going to work. I think it's great to hear that you've had a positive experience with your heat pump projects. I think that's good, and we don't often hear positive stories about heat pumps. So it's good to hear more, and I'd encourage you to talk about that more as well, and your housing association to kind of take that up. Yeah, thanks, Alicia.
And I think that's something that we're seeing through the chat. And I mean, I was going to mention Ted's point, and Ted's going to come in a moment, but it is interesting to see how, and I think it came down, and Alicia mentioned there that because the house had been properly prepared for air source heat pump, and because training was then undertaken, her bills have significantly reduced. And Ted, I'm sure we'll mention in a moment that his have increased significantly. But it ties in a lot, I think, to, you know, I mean, Liz Williams has shared there at the Centre for New Midlands, they recently produced a relevant report on the effectiveness of retrofit in damp and mould, in health outcomes, and tenant satisfaction has generally been poor. And I think that ties in a lot to what you're saying there, Andrew, which is so much of it comes down to that communication piece and actually an understanding of why these things are being done the way they are. But before I go for a response, I'm going to bring in Ted, and then we've got Sue and Mia. But Ted, do please come in, because I can see obviously it's been an engaging chat, engaging point for you in the chat today. So do please unmute and come in.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I've been poking the beast quite regularly because we've got no chimneys here. I live in one of the 4 bungalows, and there are 6 houses further up. 2 are private. One of the private ones has solar panels all over. I mean, I've been advocating for years that all old buildings and new builds should all have solar panel, because we've got no chimneys. If there's an electric strike, old people, young people alike, they've got nothing to heat themselves up with. They've got nothing to get themselves warm with. Can't even light a fire to put a kettle on. So we need an alternative. I had a heat source pump put outside my back door, right against my shed. We get a vortex of wind around the back, so it doesn't really work properly. So it was going on when it shouldn't go on and coming off when it should. All of us that had the pumps fitted have turned them off because we were told, oh, it will reduce your heating by 1/3. It went up by 300%. And we can't afford that. There's chunky radiators. I mean, my one in my living room is about yay wide and 6 feet long. And there's nothing on there to turn it on and off. The only ones you can turn on and off are in the bedrooms. Now, I don't sleep in my bedroom, which is the smallest place in the bungalow, because it's also the coldest, despite it's got a radiator. And I won't sleep in there. So I sleep in the living room, and I have a flat panel radiator, which I can turn on and off. And it's very low wattage. I have a low wattage one in the hallway, and I have another low wattage one in the bathroom. And that's how I heat the place. But without the electric, my only source is going outside and building a bonfire. That's it. There needs to be an alternative.
Yeah.
To go back to Andrew on this, I mean, I forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't have air source heat pumps. I private rent, and our installation's appalling. But I was under the impression, I think someone put in the chat, that air source heat pumps aren't meant to be turned off, but when they're costing a tenant 3 times as much, it's a difficult, you know, what are you meant to do? And I guess, is this something you're hearing from across the sector as a whole? Because when we talk about challenges and solutions for creating warmer homes, heating a home is obviously a massive part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to my point earlier about the order in which you do things, and still advocating for a fabric first approach. So in your home, Ted, you know, hopefully they looked at reducing your heat demand through insulation, through more efficient windows and doors. In some instances, it doesn't seem to be happening, and therefore, you know, you've got an inappropriate heat demand. You've got the heat pump struggling to actually heat the building, and costing a lot more than it should. So I think that really highlights the point about, you know, right solution for the right homes, making sure that you've got you're reducing heat demand as much as possible before installing a heat pump.
And that seems to be the big problem we're seeing from the from what Ted's put and others have put in the chat. And I mean, to also tie into that, I see Claire Brown has put in the chat there that we also need the decoupling of the electricity price from gas prices to make electricity cheaper than gas, which will help people switch to more electricity-based heating systems. Sue Healy, I'm going to bring you in. Good to have you with us today.
Hello. In Wales, they've got a higher decent home standard than in England, and they've made their decent home standard only becomes valid when a property becomes void. And at that point, they put all the retrofits and everything into that property. So the incoming tenant doesn't have the mess and everything and all that. So that maybe one of your solutions is actually upgrading void properties. That reduces the impact on tenants. And secondly, the consideration, as we've got an older population and a lot of them have got cognitive problems with dementia and that, some of these solutions, if you don't operate them correctly, cost you more money. What thought has been given to people with cognitive reduction and people who are registered blind? How did they cope with these changes? What are you doing for tenants to help them?
Yeah, so start with the first point about tackling voids. I think that's a really good way of approaching retrofit. What I would say though is that might be fairly stop-start. So, it should be looked at certainly, but it's not going to kind of achieve retrofit at scale, and it's not going to address some of the issues that residents are kind of facing currently with cold and damp homes and high bills. So yes, build in voids to any kind of retrofit program, but don't rely solely on it because we won't get there in time. The second point about making sure that there's the right level of education on different technologies for people with different cognitive abilities, I think is really valid as well. So that should be part of any resident engagement strategy that social housing providers and their and their supply chain partners are bought into, to make sure that people are getting the education they need in the different formats that they need, so that once new technologies are installed, they know how to use it, they know what they're going to benefit from it. So yeah, thanks, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Mia, I'm going to bring you in. Good to have you with us today.
Hey everybody, thank you, Matt. I think it's just linking into what Susan said really about voids. I think there's a lot of misconception, especially with working with housing associations, that while it's void, there's no.
Oh. There we go, you're back.
Okay.
Sorry, I meant to mute me and accidentally muted you. I'm so sorry.
No, don't be silly. And I know that obviously a lot of housing associations try their best to obviously get everything done during a void period. My question, Andrew, is do you think that housing associations need a little bit more support in understanding how to prevent things like damp and mould by actually keeping electric and heating on while the property is empty to prevent issues like that growing? I appreciate that when a property is void, it can be expensive, and I know the goal is to obviously get it ready for a family or an individual to move in and have a home. But I think there's a lot more that can be done in a void period, especially with the retrofit side of things as well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, agreed. And the temperature of the home, even if it's void, shouldn't drop below a certain level, and you need to make sure that there is ventilation as well. So it might be that they just have trickle vents in the windows, or there might be other more kind of mechanical ventilation installed. And I think it's making sure that those are actually in place and functioning, so that you're avoiding those kind of issues.
I agree. And I think it's just making sure that they're educated in that side as well. I think everybody has their individual reliabilities and what they need to do. But yeah, thank you.
As ever, sometimes it's that long-term thinking rather than the short-term fix is the challenge. Jim, I will come back to you. I'm going to bring in Liz because we've not heard from Liz yet, and I know Liz has been doing an awful lot of work with Centre for New Midlands on some of these projects, particularly around tenant engagement. So Liz, if you're still free, we'd love to hear from you. I'm hoping. Elizabeth, you still there?
I
Yes,
am, sorry. I was struggling with the buttons. I'm not used to Zoom. Hello, everybody. I have to say it breaks my heart to hear some of the story that we're hearing today. This is not how it should be. And if anybody needs some actual help in dealing with this, you should not be having to live just in one room and not be able to turn your heating on with these retrofit measures. That's completely and utterly unacceptable. What I would encourage people to do is form your own residents associations and feed back to your landlords, because they need to know. And if they're not listening to you, you do have the housing ombudsman to go to. I think if we're talking about what the session is about, though, the core funding issues that I see that are problematic in this is that they are piecemeal. The quality report that we issued was based on funding that was expected to be spent within 4 months. That's all they had to spend all of this money in the West Midlands for retrofit. Completely unacceptable. Because what happens is you have rush jobs. They don't build, they don't put fabric first, they don't put the building envelope first, and then you end up with these additional problems with mold and damp. Especially in second-hand older stock, it's not designed to have showers, it's not designed to have heating, it's not designed to have double glazing, and unless you deal with the fabric, these things will fail. But I'm just so distressed to hear people are living in distress. You do not have to live this way. It can be resolved, but we need to find a way of getting your voice back to your landlord and something being done about it. And if there's anything I can do to help anyone outside of this meeting, then please message me. But we do need to feed back to the fund when it does appear that there has to be sufficient time for proper planning and proper tenant engagement. The skills are a massive part of this. If everybody knew what they were doing, the effectiveness would be better. And unfortunately, we do have that skills gap. That's not going to be fixed overnight, unfortunately.
And it seems to be that thing between data and communication is unfortunately an ever ongoing problem in the social housing space. It seems to come up nearly every week in one form or another. And I can see, as you say, there's some stories coming through the chat of people who are either losing huge amounts of money via poor retrofit by the looks of it, seems to be what the message is coming through, but also I mean Ted had mentioned there that we've tried making complaints and it's taken a year to still try and get solutions and problems, and I think this is one of the massive issues. I'm aware we've only got about a minute left. Colin, we've not heard from you yet, so Jim, I'm going to bypass your apologies just because we've not heard from Colin. So Colin, do please come in because we've got about a minute left.
Thanks. Well, about 2, maybe 3 years ago, the government put forward a plan to have a look at houses and look at the EPC levels that they were in. And if it was below a C, then they were going to part fund some retrofits to solve some of the issues. I had a surveyor come round. He did a look through, and he said to me, "Oh yes, you definitely need your double glazing changed. Your ventilation in your wet room is not good enough. You also need the heating element in there to be changed." Right, so hopefully you'll be hearing from us when we will come around and do something. I then heard, after chasing it up and chasing it up and chasing it up, I had an EPC of C, so therefore not entitled to any retrofit. So on the one hand, I've got a professional turning around and saying, you definitely need something being done. On the other hand, having been graded a C, being told you're not entitled to anything.
Yeah. I mean, it goes to the point, Colin, that EPCs are currently inaccurate and they need to be changed of how they're capturing data, and the whole process is due for a shake-up. So that is happening, but we're probably over reliant on them as a metric of energy performance as well. So yeah, no, it's a shame that you've had to go through that as a process, because it's a lot of time and effort from your part, and it's a lot of wasted effort from the surveyors and the installers' part. So yeah, apologies for that.
Just that point around, I think everything needs updating at the moment. Certainly my house does, others do, and right across, but there are only a finite amount of resources and funds and things like that at the moment. And just one report can go, you're not there yet, and yet go forward a couple of years and you probably will do, but by then it's an even bigger job because it's going to cost more because the problems are bigger. So a fantastic session today. Andrew, for someone who wasn't feeling particularly well, thank you so much. I imagine you just want to go and turn off a screen and stop talking to people for a bit, but for you running today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Matt, for hosting, and thank you everyone for the really engaging conversation. I guess the kind of final point for me was that we've got a long way to go still, but yeah, resident education conversations and right solutions at the right time, I think are the kind of key for ways to take this forward.
And I'm sure we'll have you back on the roundtable this year, hopefully feeling a bit better, and we can deep dive into some of that a bit more, because I do think, as you say, funding and policy around this is all well and good saying, oh, we need net zero by X, but everything else around it isn't backing that up, and we're not going to reach it as it stands. So huge thank you to you, to SureServe for sponsoring today, to Alertical for sponsoring the year, but also to everyone who could attend, who provided insight and thoughts and chat today. We really appreciate it, and for your honest and candid responses as well. So for now, thank you everybody. Thank you, Andrew. Get well soon, and we'll see you all next week for the roundtable. Cheers and take care.
Cheers. Bye.